Hi. So I wanted to talk in this beautiful sun about freedom in relationship. And then I felt like this is a really important topic just to give a brief, I different perspective about how important it is that we really get a sense of self. We really show up in relationship fully owning all of what we think and what we feel and what we value in such a way that we're not asking other people to validate us, that our neediness to be seen or validated, that our insecurities about our neediness don't get in the way of love and loving. And I often find that these unconscious and kind of self-sabotaging mechanisms often find their way into most relationships, whether I'm coaching about them or that I'm actually having the experience myself. And I think most of us understand or have an idea or want to feel the freedom of being able to show up in any moment and say, this is my truth, this is what I think, this is what I feel, this is what I value. And then also, a little bit more difficult, I think, for a lot of people to hold, also have the ability and the freedom to change our mind, to give our word in this way and that meant something, but to also change that and create something new with our word that maybe is more in alignment with our now truth. This is really important, I think, to talk about, because often I find it's subconsciously sabotaging in relationship where there's an expectation for some sense of safety and security, whether that is that this person be the same way, that even though they're in a pattern that doesn't feel good for me, that's preferable than me changing or the relationship changing or losing them or losing myself. And so our capacity to change and adapt is really important in relationship. One is anytime that I ever have a new thought about something, especially if I feel it integrate, I no longer am the same person. It shifts my whole framework around where I don't relate the same. I don't relate in the same way. So what sense does that make then if I'm feeling different, that my partner would want to hold me accountable to an old version of myself? And yet, often this actually is the case. Especially if you've been married or in long-term relationships, you see that over time it's not uncommon for changes to be made. But when there's the thought or the expectation that the others stay the same or the others stay how you see them even, that can get really tricky. And then we are living in a bunch of conditions that don't actually allow for our own freedom, let alone the freedom of the other person to change or show up or create themselves anew in alignment to what is their heart's calling. And I think on the deepest level of being in relationship, we all desire deeply our own freedom to choose what's best for us, right? And then we absolutely want support and encouragement in nourishing that with us. But none of us like the feeling of somebody telling us what to do or telling us who we are or defining us. And often those definitions can feel like a prison. So freedom in relating, getting clear about where we have needs that we aren't able to hold ourselves, to meet ourselves. And a lot of these are unconscious, but they're so unconscious, they're kind of self-sabotaging, where we don't even know that they're operating in the relationship as undercurrent themes, where we're asking the other person to show up for us in a way, but not because we want to learn a tool or a skill or how to, but really just because we want the instant gratification of the feeling, so that we don't have to take care of it. So we don't even have to learn a new skill, attitude, or behavior that would actually, in the long run, help us to be better lovers of ourselves, right? And so we ask, often partners, to play a role for us so that we can either learn by suffering or learn by love, right? But the tricky part too is that learning by love in this case isn't by asking somebody else to love us. It's by recognizing that there's a lack of love in us that needs love and loving, and to learn how to do it ourselves. That's real freedom. And then when we start taking care of our own needs and neediness, we actually let everybody off the hook to show up in any certain way for us other than what they also choose for themselves. And that's when real nourishment and love gets to come in, is when we both or all understand that really what we want is to deeply love ourselves fully and completely, to be a whole and complete person. Because I think unconsciously, we know that a whole person knows how to love wholly. Yet, we're also in a world of conditions where love also feels like scarcity and lack. And if we don't have the tools, or even if we do have the tools, the more love we have, the more threatening that might be to a person who doesn't, because they don't know what actually having that love means, and actually how secure love, how much security love actually creates, versus the insecurity of losing love. And then all of the different scheming in the ways that the mind or the ego or the separate feeling of self-identity creates in a self-sabotaging way to get its needs met. And these short-term strategies don't work. And so what I really wanted to suggest is a new way of relating, where we first get our need for ourselves, and instead of looking at that as selfish, for wanting ourselves and for needing ourselves, I need to show up for myself, to recognize that there is no knight in shining armor coming to my rescue, right? There is myself and my connection with Source. When I can get clear that that's my lifeline, everything else gets let off the hook. And it feels really good then to actually allow people to show up from their heart, from what they really actually genuinely want to give, versus a place in me that needs them to show up from a condition and wants them to give in a way that I may not be fully aware that I'm not honoring by, yes, receiving, but also taking that, learning with that, how to multiply that within myself, how to invest what was given and then regenerate that, whether that's an emotion, a way of being, that we recognize in this new paradigm of relating, that the selfishness that we're taught in the old paradigm becomes selfness, full of self, so vibrant and aware and big, and the importance of us nourishing all of us fully as ourselves, being able to authentically show up in relationship to our divinity and nourish that and understand that from all other places, from that place all others are actually nourished. And how beautiful that is to allow ourselves to really give because we want to give, right? And so a way that we can invite each other, especially in relationship, to show up in a new way is if there happens to be a conflict. If our first inclination is to get, oh, they're hurting, and that hurt is from a disconnected place within themselves, there is themselves as their whole sense of self, and then there's the part, the fragment that's hurting. That's not who they are. That's the part that is needing care, as if a parent is coming to the child and holding it. And they're needing to parent to that small part of themselves, whether that's holding that in love and connection, but choosing to be with that part, and creating for ourselves then and sustaining relationships where we invite the other person to hold themselves, and we say, sweetheart, I hear that you're hurting. That sounds and feels really awful. I love you. Why don't you take some time to just feel that, connect with that? I want to hear all about that. When you find the source of that, or when you feel, more stable within yourself, or when that in you shifts. Let's talk about that. But I'm inviting you right now to just take some time and for yourself, and I'm going to go do this thing over here. I'm here. I love you. And then when you're feeling better with yourself, let's connect. And then encouraging each other with love to come back to that place within ourselves and care for ourselves first. That the whole relationship be about getting that it's our responsibility to align ourselves, in our humanity, maybe we didn't get the parents that could show up for us in the way that we need, and we're relearning how to parent ourselves. But we're also learning how to deepen our love and our connection with ourselves too. And it really is being honest with what's going on with us, recognizing that we're the ones holding ourselves in that, and inviting, if that feels good, others to witness that, but they're not responsible for holding that. So we start to allow everyone to be off the hook of our own neediness, and we recognize then and start building our strength in self-regeneration, that we are all we need, that I need myself, and to be full of selfness, right? What would our relationships look like if we invited each other back to ourselves, if we held the space lovingly in vibration of no judgment, understanding that we all experience forgetting of ourselves, and we can all be beacons of love and reminders of where to go to be fully nourished, that will nourish us the most deep. And That's not to be confused by how nice that feels to be held in our smallness, or to say that we don't need each other in some way to do that or to show up. But the neediness that I'm really speaking to is the neediness of self. That there is nobody that knows you better than you, and there's nobody that can hold your heart better than you can hold your heart. And what does that look like to actually trust that? To really show up and develop the relationship that you've always dreamt of, that loving, unified relationship with you. Where every relationship from that place is a love relationship, where you're just inviting love to love itself.